The tragic life of Marie Antoinette began not in the frivolous luxury of Versailles, but in the cold, strict, and complex environment of the Hofburg Palace and Schönbrunn Summer Palace in Vienna. She was born as Maria Antonia Josepha Johanna on November 2, 1755, the youngest daughter of the powerful Empress Maria Theresa. Born on All Souls' Day, the event was later viewed as an ominous start to her life. Maria Theresa, a master of matrimonial diplomacy, had chosen Maria Antonia as the key component to solidify the reversal of alliances Renversement Day, alliances of 1756, strategically connecting the Habsburg and Bourbon dynasties. As one of the youngest children in a large family, Maria Antonia did not receive the intense educational focus given to her eldest siblings. Her academic education was severely lacking. At age 10, she struggled with writing native German and was not fluent in French. Her knowledge of history and politics was almost non-existent, primarily due to her idleness and the Empress's preoccupation with ruling the empire. The French tutor, Abbé Mathieusac de Vermond, remarked that while she was more intelligent than people think, she was a little lazy and extremely frivolous, very difficult to teach. Despite her academic deficiencies, Maria Antonia excelled in the arts. She developed considerable musical talent under the instruction of the great composer Christoph Willibald Gluck, learning to play the harp and harpsichord. She was also particularly adept at dancing, displaying an admired grace and poise, as well as being taught painting. These artistic pursuits built her natural confidence and charm, which became her powerful social assets, but ultimately, they failed to prepare her for the brutal realities of politics and economics. Maria Antonia became the French candidate only after the sudden death of her older sister, Maria Josepha, from smallpox in 1767. Following this, the 12-year-old was thrust into an accelerated Francisation process. This crash course involved painful dental corrections, rigorous training in the characteristic gliding walk of Versailles by ballet master Jean-Georges Nouvier, and memorizing the hundreds of complex rules of French court ceremony. Maria Theresa constantly instructed her daughter, turning her into a diplomatic product designed to serve the interests of the Habsburg Empire. The journey culminated in a politically charged ritual on an island on the Rhine. After a proxy wedding in Vienna, April 19, 1717, Maria Antonia was completely stripped of everything Austrian jewelry. Servants and entered a special tent, stark naked, to be dressed entirely in French attire. From that moment, Archduchess Maria Antonia of Austria was dead, and Dauphine Marie Antoinette of France was born. At only 14, with charm but lacking wisdom, she stepped onto French soil, unaware that the French gown she wore was not the dress of a queen but the sacrificial cloak for a political altar, ushering in one of the greatest tragedies of European history. In 1770, at the age of 14, Maria Antonia completed her long-arranged political destiny by marrying Louis Auguste, the Dauphin of France. Following her symbolic transformation on the Rhine, she was formally welcomed by the French public, who were initially captivated by her youthful beauty and graceful demeanor. On May 16, 1770, the official wedding at the Palace of Versailles was an extravagant display of power. However, this splendor was marred by tragedy when a catastrophic stampede during the celebratory fireworks in Paris killed over 130 people, an event immediately viewed as an ill omen for the marriage and the future of France. The Austrian bride quickly faced a profound culture shock at the extremely rigid French court. Versailles was governed by stifling, complex rules of ceremony etiquette that Marie Antoinette found humiliating, particularly the public nature of rituals like the lever. Furthermore, she was immediately isolated and viewed by the French aristocracy with suspicion and contempt. Labeled as l'Autrican, the Austrian woman, the most serious issue, however, was her personal relationship with the shy Louis Auguste. The marriage remained unconsummated for 7 long years. This imperfection became a public political crisis, fueling constant ridicule and gossip, and directly threatening the stability of the Bourbon dynasty and the Austro-French alliance due to the lack of an heir. To cope with the suffocating etiquette and the immense personal frustration of her unfulfilled marriage, Marie Antoinette sought refuge and pleasure elsewhere. She created a close-knit inner circle coterie and frequently hosted private parties, gambling sessions, and amateur theatricals at the smaller Petit Trianon. She also became Europe's leading fashion trendsetter, introducing bold styles and extravagantly decorated, towering poufs. These attempts to escape boredom and pressure, while initially harmless, inadvertently sowed the seeds for her notorious future image, that of a frivolous, party-loving, and fiscally irresponsible Dauphine. This period established the foundation for the scrutiny, isolation, and envy that would precede her eventual tragedy. The period from 1770 to 1774 was a tempestuous chapter where the innocent Austrian Archduchess struggled for survival at Versailles. Marie Antoinette immediately encountered the system of court etiquette, which was designed not merely as ritual but as a political tool to maximize monarchical power and control the nobility. Her life as the Dauphine was entirely public. From the lever to the kucher, every action was scrutinized by ranking nobles. Marie Antoinette, who loved freedom and privacy, felt profoundly insulted by this invasion, once exclaiming, "This is tiresome. I could have put on my gown myself by now," during the rigid dressing ritual. Her subsequent conflicts with the conservative Duchess de Noailles, whom she nicknamed Madame Etiquette, were not just personal clashes but her first acts of rebellion against the political constraints of the French court. Versailles was a political viper's nest, where Marie Antoinette faced immediate hostility, particularly from the Mesdames Tonks, King Louis XV's daughters, who opposed the Austro-French alliance. They successfully indoctrinated her against Madame du Barry, Louis XV's powerful mistress of humble origins. Driven by Habsburg pride and this council, Marie Antoinette refused to speak to du Barry, creating a diplomatic crisis that insulted Louis XV personally and threatened the Franco-Austrian alliance. The pressure from her mother, Empress Maria Theresa, and the Austrian ambassador, Count de Mercy-Argenteau, was immense. This silent war lasted a year, only ending when Marie Antoinette, forced to concede to protect the alliance, delivered the minimal but politically sufficient remark, "There are a great many people at Versailles today." This failure taught her the political fragility of her position, deepening her resentment towards the court. The most severe source of psychological stress and public humiliation for Marie Antoinette during her early years was the unconsummated state of her marriage to Louis Auguste. For 7 years, the couple remained childless, fueling malicious rumors at court that blamed Marie Antoinette as barren or Louis Auguste as impotent, both damaging the dynasty's legitimacy. The true physical issue lay with Louis Auguste, who likely suffered from phimosis, making intercourse painful. This crisis became a public scandal that undermined Marie Antoinette's authority and image as a capable wife. The situation was so dire that it required the personal secret intervention of her brother, Emperor Joseph II, in 1777. Joseph II diagnosed the issue as physical, combined with the Dauphine's extreme awkwardness, eventually advising the minor surgery that led to the marriage's consummation and the birth of their first child in 1778. Faced with isolation, court hostility, and the continuous marital crisis, Marie Antoinette developed a dual personality and sought refuge in a close-knit group of friends, or coterie, including the Princess de Lamballe and the Duchesse de Polignac. This group provided the personal warmth and support absent in her marriage and court life. Simultaneously, she began public acts of personal rebellion. She broke traditional dress codes by promoting her designer, Rose Burton, and introducing extravagant hairstyles like the towering pouf. She also sought entertainment by frequently escaping Versailles for anonymous masked balls in Paris and engaging in all-night gambling sessions with huge stakes. While these actions were stress relievers, they generated fierce jealousy from excluded nobles and became the source of all the damaging rumors regarding her immorality, extravagance, and political favoritism. Laying the foundation for her later image as Madame Déficit, the challenging Dauphine period abruptly ended in 1774, with the sudden death of King Louis XV from smallpox. As the king lay dying in a state of terrible contagion, Louis Auguste and Marie Antoinette were forced to flee his presence. On May 10, 1774, the moment of transition was marked dramatically. When news of Louis XV's death arrived, a loud noise was heard, the sound of all the courtiers rushing away from the dead king to pay homage to the new monarch. Marie Antoinette and Louis Auguste, still young and fearful, reportedly knelt together, embracing, and exclaimed, "O God, guide us and rule us, for we are too young to reign." At the age of 18, Marie Antoinette became the Queen of France. This promotion granted her the freedom she craved, but it solidified her vulnerable position in history. as her personal rebellion against political pressure was now magnified by the burdens of the crown. In 1774, Marie Antoinette officially became Queen of France at the age of 18. Alongside her husband, Louis XVI, the young couple symbolized fresh hope for the French public. Louis XVI, though well-intentioned and moral, lacked decisive leadership and granted the Queen unusual personal freedom. Marie Antoinette immediately leveraged her soft power to protect the Austro-French alliance, attempting to secure key positions for pro-Austrian candidates. However, her most controversial political action was actively campaigning for the dismissal of Louis XV's veteran ministers, notably d'Aiguillon and Terray, whom she disliked personally. While this was initially popular, it fueled rumors that the Queen was manipulating the king for personal vengeance, marking her first step from isolated Dauphine to a queen suspected of political overreach and serving foreign interests. Marie Antoinette redefined European aristocracy's fashion by elevating her dressmaker, Rose Burton, to a minister of fashion, ushering in the era of haute couture. She abandoned rigid court gowns for lighter, more romantic styles. Her most notorious creation was the towering pouf hairstyle, often lavishly decorated, symbolizing extravagance. More controversially, the introduction of the chemise à la reine, simple white muslin gown, worn without a corset, was deemed scandalous, being simultaneously criticized as too simple like a servant and too sensual, almost naked. The astronomical spending on her wardrobe, jewelry, and gambling solidified her public image as Madame Deficit. Although her expenses were a minor contributor to the national debt, she became the perfect, widely recognized symbol of the monarchy's wastefulness and irresponsibility. The Queen's desperate need to escape the restrictive court etiquette led her to create the Hameau de la Reine, the Queen's Hamlet, near Versailles in the late 1770s. Inspired by the romantic naturalism of philosophers like Rousseau, the Hamlet was a meticulously designed functional model farm where Marie Antoinette and her inner circle or coterie would play at being peasants or shepherdesses, often in expensive silk gauze costumes. While intended as a harmless private sanctuary, this elaborate fantasy was viewed by the struggling French public as the ultimate evidence of the Queen's utter disconnect from reality and her frivolous nature. The use of national funds to build a theatrical stage for aristocratic amusement intensified public resentment and strongly cemented her image as the frivolous queen. Under Marie Antoinette's reign, the widespread distribution of illegal libels, defamatory pamphlets and rumors became a powerful political weapon. Because the king was often perceived as well-meaning, the full force of public hatred was directed at the queen. The foreign-born Lottrechin, the Austrian woman, these pamphlets relentlessly attacked her character, depicting her as sexually debauched Messalina, accusing her of endless adulterous and homosexual affairs, often naming the Princess de Lamballe or Duchesse de Polignac, and serving Austrian interests to drain the French treasury. Furthermore, the famous phrase, "let them eat cake, qu'il mangent de la brioche," though a much older saying falsely attributed to her, was widely believed. This myth perfectly encapsulated the public perception of her as an arrogant, heartless queen, and served as one of the most effective propaganda tools used to undermine the monarchy's legitimacy. After 7 years of a humiliating unconsummated marriage, the king's physical issue was resolved following the intervention of her brother, Emperor Joseph II, in 1777. The marriage was finally fulfilled, leading to the birth of their first child, Marie-Therese Charlotte, Madame Royale, in 1778. The greatest joy came in 1781 with the birth of their son, Louis Joseph, the Dauphin of France. The arrival of the male heir consolidated the Bourbon dynasty and was Marie Antoinette's most basic political fulfillment. Following motherhood, the queen reportedly matured, becoming less focused on frivolous entertainment. However, this change came too late. Her public image had been permanently destroyed. Even the birth of the Dauphin failed to stop the libels from baselessly claiming the child was the result of adultery, confirming that the foundation for her political and personal downfall was already set. The period from 1774 to 1785 marked Marie Antoinette's peak of personal luxury, simultaneously cementing her image as Madame Deficit. Her personal extravagance centered on fashion, where she elevated her dressmaker, Rose Burton, to the Minister of Fashion. This partnership abandoned rigid court gowns for new, costly styles that changed daily, leading to massive, deferred bills. The extreme opulence was embodied in the towering poof hairstyles, adorned with expensive materials and even miniature scenes, which the public resented, believing the queen was consuming essential food staples, like flour and fat, for her vanity. This spending, though small relative to the national debt, made her the perfect visual symbol of the monarchy's wastefulness. Beyond fashion, the queen's personal expenses soared due to high-stakes gambling and her excessive favoritism toward her close circle, the coterie. She frequently hosted all-night card games with enormous stakes, often losing substantial sums, which Louis XVI secretly covered. This lack of financial control forced the king to issue a public ban on high-stakes gambling at Versailles. Her greatest indiscretion was the generous patronage of the Polignac family, who received titles, pensions, and funds, totaling millions of livres. This blatant favoritism alienated the vast majority of the French aristocracy, who felt entitled to these privileges, leading to accusations that Marie Antoinette was corruptly enriching a small clique and breaking the traditional court system. While Marie Antoinette became the public face of extravagance, the true source of France's colossal national debt lay in the costly wars, such as the American Revolution, and a deeply unjust tax system that exempted the nobility and clergy. Historians estimate the royal family's personal spending accounted for only about 5 to 6% of the national budget. However, Marie Antoinette made this waste highly visible and politically unjustifiable. She spent a fortune redesigning the Petit Trianon and constructing the Hameau de la Reine, the Queen's Hamlet, a theatrical, costly model village. To the starving public, the sight of the Queen playing peasant in expensive silk gauze was conclusive proof of her monumental disconnect from reality, further solidifying her image as the frivolous queen who did not care for the nation's suffering. The event that most severely and irreparably damaged Marie Antoinette's reputation was the affair of the diamond necklace. The queen had previously refused the purchase of an astronomically expensive necklace, famously stating France needed warships more than diamonds. An impoverished noblewoman, Jeanne de la Motte, orchestrated a sophisticated fraud, tricking Cardinal Louis de Rohan, who was desperate for the queen's favor, into believing he was acting as the queen's secret intermediary. To buy the necklace in installments, Jeanne de la Motte used forged letters at a nighttime meeting with an impersonator to convince Rohan. When the jewelers sought payment from the queen, the conspiracy unraveled, leading Louis XVI to order the dramatic public arrests of Rohan and La Motte, forcing the scandal into the political sphere of the Paris Parliament. Louis XVI intended the public trial before the Paris Parliament to clear the Queen's name. However, he committed a fatal political error. In the shocking verdict of 1786, while the lead fraudster, Jeanne de la Motte, was punished, Cardinal Rohan was acquitted. Although Marie Antoinette was factually innocent of the fraud, the acquittal was interpreted by the public as proof that the Queen had lied, secretly desired the necklace, and then betrayed Rohan when the plot failed. This verdict was the most potent public indictment against her. It transformed the already established Madame Déficit into a deceitful, corrupt, and dangerous foreign manipulator. The diamond necklace affair did more than just waste money. It completed the destruction of the monarchy's sanctity and Marie Antoinette's reputation, laying the foundation for the fervent hatred that fueled the approaching revolution. The period of 1786 to 1789 saw the French absolute monarchy collapse under a severe financial crisis. The core issue was not solely the Queen's spending, despite the Madame Déficit label, but the massive debt incurred primarily from the American Revolutionary War, costing an estimated 1 billion livres. This debt was compounded by the inherently unjust and obsolete tax system, the first and second estates, clergy, and nobility. Louis XVI's attempts to resolve the crisis by appointing reform-minded finance ministers were met with continuous resistance from the privileged classes. Jacques Necker initially disguised the debt by borrowing, but was forced out after publishing a misleading compte rendu that scapegoated court spending. His successor, Charles Alexander de Coligny, proposed a radical uniform land tax applicable to all estates. Knowing the Paris Parliament would resist, Coligny and the king convened the Assembly of Notables, 1787. This gambit failed spectacularly, as the nobility refused to surrender their tax privileges. Lomenie de Brienne followed with the same plan but was blocked by the Parliament, which declared that only the Estates General not convened since 1614 had the authority to approve fundamental tax changes. From 1785 onward, Marie Antoinette attempted to shed her image of frivolousness, becoming more serious, focused on motherhood, and significantly reducing her personal spending on gambling and fashion. However, this change was too late to sway public opinion. Furthermore, her involvement in politics actually increased. Given Louis XVI's indecisiveness, she became a source of consistency for ministers and foreign ambassadors. Her support for firm decisions led to her being dubbed Madame Veto, and crucially, her continued intimate correspondence with her brother, Emperor Joseph II, and the Austrian ambassador Count de Mercy-Argenteau further fueled public perception that l'Autrichienne was prioritizing foreign interests and betraying France. In August 1788, he was forced to announce the convening of the Estates General in 1789, publicly acknowledging the monarchy's failure to govern the crisis, while Louis XVI and the recalled Jacques Necker granted the Third Estate a doubling of their representation, equal to the other two estates combined to appease the public. They fatally refused to definitively resolve the critical issue of voting by head rather than by order. This refusal was a strategic blunder, as it guaranteed an immediate, unavoidable conflict between the privileged orders and the Third Estate when the Assembly opened. Simultaneously with the financial and political paralysis, a severe food crisis pushed the populace to the breaking point. A devastating harvest in 1788 caused the price of bread, the staple food, to soar to levels where poor workers spent up to 88% of their income just to eat. In this environment of famine and desperation, the lingering rumors of Marie Antoinette's past luxury became terrifying accusations of a famine causer. Violence erupted in the spring of 1789, exemplified by the Réveillon riots in Paris. The combination of an economic collapse, a severe food shortage, and the political war between the crown and the nobility led to the convening of the Estates General intended as a solution. It became the spark that ignited the ultimate flame of the French Revolution. The year 1789 began with the convening of the Estates General on May 5, the first time since 1614. Class distinctions were immediately emphasized through ceremony, with the Third Estate delegates forced to wear simple black attire. The core conflict centered on voting rights. Louis XVI refused to settle the issue of voting by head versus by order, leading to an immediate deadlock. In a revolutionary act, the Third Estate declared itself the National Assembly on June 17. This was followed by the tennis court oath on June 20, where delegates swore not to disband until a constitution was drafted. The monarchy reacted with confrontation, culminating in the dismissal of the popular minister Jacques Necker on July 11, an action widely seen as an attempt to crush the burgeoning constitutional movement. The dismissal of Necker, coupled with soaring bread prices and the presence of royal troops, ignited the Parisian population. On July 14, 1789, the people stormed the Bastille fortress, a powerful symbol of royal tyranny. Though militarily minor, the event was a decisive symbolic victory that signaled the collapse of the king's absolute power. Louis XVI was forced to yield, ordering the withdrawal of troops, recalling Necker, and personally traveling to Paris to recognize the National Assembly and the new National Guard. He accepted wearing the tricolor cockade of the Revolution, a public humiliation of his traditional authority. Marie Antoinette, deeply opposed to these concessions, was solidified as the unwavering center of the counter-revolutionary faction. The momentum continued with the Great Fear Grande Père, a wave of peasant uprisings against their landlords across the countryside. To address this chaos, the National Assembly decreed the complete abolition of the feudal system on the night of August 4, 1789, effectively ending the Société d'Ordres. Later that month, the Assembly passed the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a landmark document proclaiming equality and natural rights. However, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette refused to sanction both the August decrees and the Declaration, a catastrophic political error that affirmed their deep-seated opposition to the revolution's principles and intensified public distrust. The king's refusal to approve the decrees, combined with the unrelieved bread crisis and rumors of royal defiance, led to a second major confrontation. On October 5, 1789, thousands of Parisian market women marched to Versailles, demanding bread and the return of the royal family to Paris. The following day, the mob invaded the palace, forcing Marie Antoinette to flee her private quarters. In a moment of high drama, she faced the crowd on the balcony. Eventually, the royal family was compelled to leave Versailles and were escorted back to Paris under the watchful eyes of the crowd. The king was forced to reside at the Tuileries Palace in the city center, where they became the revolution's virtual prisoners. After the October March, the timid Louis XVI became politically paralyzed, prompting Marie Antoinette to step fully into the role of the monarchy's main political force. She initiated secret negotiations with influential figures like Count de Mirabeau to save the monarchy through constitutional means, yet privately remained convinced that only foreign military intervention could restore the crown's power. Despite her efforts, her confinement at the Tuileries only amplified public hatred. Pamphlets viciously attacked her as the Austrian tigress and Madame Veto due to the king's use of his constitutional veto power. The 1789 events transformed Marie Antoinette from a disliked queen into the definitive symbol of counter-revolution, now living under constant surveillance, preparing for her ultimate fate. Following the October March, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were virtual prisoners at the Tuileries Palace in Paris, enduring continuous humiliation and strict surveillance during 1790. They were constantly monitored by the National Guard under Lafayette, and subject to intrusive inspections meant to emphasize the people's new power, while Louis XVI attempted to project a public face of reluctant cooperation with the constitutional monarchy. Marie Antoinette remained utterly resolute. She completely rejected the revolution's core principles, earning her the nicknames Madame Veto and the Greek Queen. Her strategic focus was the dangerous double-edged strategy of outward compliance combined with feverish secret correspondence seeking foreign aid. Though the sudden death of her internal advisor, Mirabeau, in April 1791, eliminated her best chance for a political compromise. A major crisis that pushed the deeply devout king to contemplate escape was the civil constitution of the clergy in 1790. This law required priests to swear loyalty to the French constitution over the Pope, leading to a profound schism and forcing Louis XVI to choose between his throne and his soul. Though he reluctantly signed the law under duress, he became convinced he had violated his religious oath. This crisis, combined with the humiliation of the prayer carriage incident in April 1791, where a Parisian mob blocked the royal family from leaving the Tuileries to take Easter Mass with a non-juring priest, provided undeniable proof that they were prisoners of the revolution and fueled their resolve to flee. Determined to escape their captivity, the royal family executed a plan primarily orchestrated by Marie Antoinette's confidant, Count Hans Axel von Fersen. Their goal was the fortified town of Montmedy, near the eastern border. The escape began on the night of June 20th to 21st, 1791, but failed miserably due to a chain of fatal errors. Crucially, Louis XVI insisted on using a huge, recognizable, and slow Berlin carriage, which severely delayed their schedule by 3 hours. The king's own carelessness led to his recognition by Postmaster Jean-Baptiste Drouot at Septmanhold, who compared the king's face to the image on the revolutionary paper Money Assignat. Drouot rode ahead on a shortcut, alerting local authorities, and the family was decisively captured at Varennes. The journey back to Paris was a humiliating procession of shame, where the royal family was escorted under tight guard, subjected to public insults and silent contempt. The psychological stress was so immense that Marie Antoinette's hair reportedly turned white. Politically, the flight to Varennes was catastrophic, dispelling all remaining public trust. By attempting to flee and seek foreign support, Louis XVI was immediately branded a traitor and an enemy of the people. His farewell document, in which he vehemently denounced all revolutionary reforms, was made public and seen as undeniable proof of his betrayal. This event irrevocably opened the door for the idea of abolishing the monarchy and establishing a republic. Following Varennes, the French royal family were no longer sovereigns but hostages of an increasingly radical revolution. The capture directly led to the Champ de Mars massacre in July 1791, marking a definitive split between moderates and the Republican faction. Confined to the Tuileries under relentless surveillance, Marie Antoinette transformed into the monarchy's last source of resolve. She intensified her secret communications, convinced that only foreign military intervention could save them. The public hatred continued to mount, with pamphlets now viciously attacking her as the Austrian tigress and the manipulative Madame Veto. The period ended with the royal family stripped of all authority, preparing to face a revolutionary government that viewed them as foreign enemies and traitors. Following the flight to Varennes, Marie Antoinette was convinced that foreign military intervention was the only way to restore the monarchy. She actively corresponded with European leaders, urging them to attack France. This strategy culminated in the Declaration of Pillnitz, August 1791, issued by Austria and Prussia, which threatened intervention if the king was harmed. While meant as a deterrent, the declaration was viewed by Parisian revolutionaries as undeniable proof of a foreign conspiracy led by Lautrechon, the Austrian woman. This led the Legislative Assembly to preemptively declare war on Austria in April 1792. The royal family secretly welcomed the war, believing it would bring a swift Allied victory, but their hope proved to be a fatal miscalculation. The war went poorly for France, intensifying Parisian fears of royal treachery. The situation escalated dramatically with the Brunswick Manifesto, July 1792, which threatened unforgettable vengeance if the royal family was harmed, a threat that enraged the public rather than intimidated them. This anger exploded on August 10, 1792, when radical sans-culottes and volunteers attacked the Tuileries Palace. Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were forced to abandon the palace and seek refuge with the Legislative Assembly, an act that symbolized his final abdication of power. The ensuing massacre of the loyal Swiss Guard led the Assembly to officially suspend the king's powers. On September 21, 1792, the monarchy was formally abolished, and the First French Republic was declared. Following the August 10th insurrection, the former king and queen were imprisoned at the Temple Tower in Paris, becoming citizen Louis Capet and citizen Marie Antoinette. Their life was one of harsh captivity and continuous humiliation. The horror reached a peak during the September massacres 1792, where thousands of perceived enemies were slaughtered, including Marie Antoinette's dearest friend, the Princesse de la Belle, whose severed head was paraded outside the Queen's window. The tragedy deepened in 1793 with the permanent separation of the family. Most devastatingly, the loss of her young son, Louis Charles, the Dauphin, who was taken to be re-educated by the Republic. This separation irrevocably shattered Marie Antoinette's spirit. The revolution's final step against the monarchy was the trial of the former king. Louis XVI was put on trial before the National Convention in December 1792. Charged with treason based on evidence, including secret correspondence found at the Tuileries. Despite his dignified defense, he was convicted and sentenced to death by a narrow vote. On January 21, 1793, Louis XVI was executed by the guillotine at the Place de la Révolution. His death transformed Marie Antoinette into the Widow Capet and served as the direct catalyst for other European powers, including Britain and Spain, to join the coalition against France, escalating the conflict and intensifying the revolutionary fervor known as the Reign of Terror. In August 1793, Marie Antoinette was transferred to the grim conciergerie prison, the antechamber to the guillotine. She was brought before the Revolutionary Tribunal on October 14, 1793, in what was a political farce. The charges included treason, squandering the national treasury, and conspiracy. The most vile and baseless accusation levied against her was that of incest with her young son. When questioned, Marie Antoinette delivered a final moment of defiance, stating that nature itself refuses to answer such an accusation against a mother, a reply that momentarily moved the hostile crowd. Despite her courage, she was sentenced to death and guillotined on October 16, 1793, at the Place de la Révolution, 9 months after her husband. Her death marked the violent conclusion of the Bourbon monarchy and the culmination of the Reign of Terror. Marie Antoinette's execution marked the definitive end of the French absolute monarchy and the doctrine of the divine right of kings. Her death was not just the killing of an individual but a sacred breakdown, signaling that ultimate sovereignty now rested with the people. She became the ideal cautionary figure, illustrating the perils of an elite utterly disconnected from the people's reality. Her association with extravagance, from her elaborate fashions to the hameau de la reine, made her the tangible target for public blame, consolidating the Madame Déficit image. The diamond necklace affair, in particular, solidified the public perception of her as irresponsible and corrupt, contributing massively to the moral collapse of the crown. Despite the political turmoil she represented, Marie Antoinette remains one of history's most influential trendsetters in culture and style. As the queen of fashion, her collaboration with Rose Burton effectively pioneered the concept of haute couture, shifting European court aesthetics from rigid, heavy garments to lighter, more romantic styles. The controversial yet enduring chemise à la reine gown set a new trend for classical simplicity that influenced the subsequent Regency era. Furthermore, her creation of the Hameau de la Reine at Versailles was a significant manifestation of 18th century romantic landscape architecture, favoring the Le Jardin Anglais, English garden style, over the formal French designs, a legacy that continues to influence modern park and garden design. Marie Antoinette's life was quickly transformed into two diametrically opposed political narratives. For the revolutionaries, she was the quintessential villain, L'Autrichienne, the foreign traitor, Madame Veto, the manipulator of the king, and an immoral monster, with liberals inventing vile accusations of incest and corruption to dehumanize and delegitimize the monarchy. Conversely, for the royalists, she was instantly sanctified as a Catholic martyr and a heroic queen. Her dignity before the revolutionary tribunal and her bravery at the scaffold were used as powerful propaganda to rally support for the counter-revolution against the Republic's perceived atheism and brutality. This enduring contradiction underscores how her historical reality was often obscured by the political needs of both factions. The tragic drama of Marie Antoinette's life has provided continuous inspiration for artists, writers, and filmmakers for over 2 centuries. She remains a central figure in literature and cinema, with modern depictions such as those in Sofia Coppola's films, often focusing on humanizing her, contrasting her personal isolation and youth with the overwhelming pressures of the French court. Today, her image is still widely referenced in high fashion, luxury advertising, and jewelry, permanently linking her name with themes of extravagance, refined Rococo style, and daring aesthetics. Her story is a timeless narrative of innocence, confronting an impossible historical force. Ultimately, Marie Antoinette's legacy is defined by a blend of personal failings and historical victimhood. She suffered from a severe lack of political education and was undeniably frivolous in her early years, overly focusing on personal pleasures like fashion and gambling. However, she was equally a victim of intense xenophobia due to her Austrian origin and political hatred, with her character being maliciously distorted by slanderous accusations. In her final years after 1789, she exhibited remarkable maturity and fortitude, refusing to abandon her family or shirk her destiny. Marie Antoinette entered history as the tragic symbol of the last queen of a dying empire, who paid with her life, not just for her own errors, but for the inherent corruption and ultimate collapse of the entire Ancien regime she represented.